Peace and Black Power, Black family. It's your brother Chase back at you again with another reactionary video. And today, family, we're gonna have a very serious breakdown, a very serious reaction. As you can see by the video, this is gonna be a message to our esteemed elder, Professor James Smalls. It's gonna be very respectful, but very factual at the same time. I did a podcast earlier in the week where we addressed some of the comments made by our esteemed elder, Professor James Smalls, and his correlation or him correlating FBA, Foundational Black Americans, to the CIA. And it kind of rubbed a lot of foundational Black Americans the wrong way, and rightfully so. I understand that. So we're gonna, do a breakdown on why a lot of foundational Black Americans felt a certain type of way, for a very educational standpoint, from a very educational standpoint, so that we can grow and learn from these different types of things. And hopefully, Professor James Smalls, I know he'll see this video because I know him personally, and I'm going to send the video to him, so we can have a deeper conversation. He can have a deeper understanding of what's or where he went wrong as it pertains to foundational Black Americans and speaking on the lineage, family. With that being said, family, make sure you like the video, you subscribe to the channel. I know some of you are going to be very animated and emotional in the comment section. Let's just please be respectful for your brother Chase. Let's be respectful when we respond. And with that being said, family, let's get straight into the video. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to respond to this in particular is because I'm part of the reason for Professor James Smalls, for lack of a better term, rant that he went on a couple weeks ago on Facebook, and some of the things he was saying. So as some of you know, I have a huge media page called Voice of the Ancestors that I'm the owner and operator of. It is on Instagram. I now have over 600,000 followers on the page, a page that I've been, starting for years, man. This go back to my Pan-African days back in 2018. And I still run it and operate it, and it highlights global Black history, truths, and different factual information around the quote-unquote diaspora. I still run that page to this day. But one of the videos that I put up, and I've posted multiple times, is Professor James Small on 125th Street in Harlem, and he's breaking down the truth about Pan-Africanism. And I posted this video before, but this time it went especially viral. And a lot of people, I guess, and I know because I've spoken to Professor Small since he's put out this video personally on the phone. A lot of people from the diaspora gave him a phone call. They got on him. And he came out and he made this Facebook Live. And I'm going to play it in its entirety. And then we're going to respond and react to it. And we're going to talk some receipts. We're going to give some receipts today and factual evidence today, dealing with the Professor James Small situation. So with that being said, just to add some context, what he's responding to my video. And I'll play that video later on in this video. So with that being said, let's get into it, family.
Hotep, Machio. I guess.
And by the way, this is about a half of the video. I'm not gonna play the full videos. Full videos like 15 minutes. So I'm gonna play like half of the videos, like 5-6 minutes.
Everybody know my face. This is Professor James Small, and I'm just responding to some people who seem to get fun out of a video I did about 10 years ago. It's an hour long plus, but someone took 2 minutes of it where I'm being critical of my family, brothers and sisters, mainly brothers from the continent of Africa who was recent arrival in a conflict with the merchants from here and the continent on 125th Street. And so they decide they don't want to watch the entire tape where I'm critical of African American, critical of Africa from the Caribbean, critical of people of color who come to America and decide that their best ally are white people rather than African people. And that conflict had to do with trying to get brothers from the different spaces to go to a meeting at the National Black Theater to try to form a merchant group that could stand up against the police coming and taking the materials, the clothing and tapes of the young African American brothers who didn't have a merchant license. Well, most people out there didn't have it, but the police tend to pick on the young teenagers who was out there trying to make a living. And I was trying to bring some peace by criticizing everybody. Now, my criticism might have been a little harsh, but I was criticizing myself as well. But I want to make it clear to people in the world, I'm an African. When I say identify myself racially, I'm an African. African American is an ethnic identity that has to do with where I live. America is a geopolitical place. It's not a race. Africa is my race. Africa is my genesis. Africa is my culture. And I want to make it clear, I am not ADOS. Do not support them or their concept. I'm not FBA. Do not support them or their concept or their attack against African peoples or the attack against Pan-Africanism, which shows a lot of ignorance and misunderstanding. I'm an African. And if someone wants to clip that little 2 minutes to try to create a critical negative, let those same person look at the other 100 plus videos that I have on the YouTube. And there's a couple of thousand more videos if you want to really go looking, and you will find they're 100% pro-African, pro-freedom, pro-identity, pro-Pan-Africanism. So don't get me confused with yourself, because you're cowards and you're afraid to identify as Africans because you don't want the responsibility to fight for freedom. I'm not a coward. I'm 80 years old, and I've spent 60 plus of those 80 years in a day-to-day constant freedom fight on the part of my people. So cowards, if you want to be critical of our race, if you want to be, and anyone have a right to criticize ourselves and our race, we have a right to do that and try to be appropriate. And so I say to brothers and sisters, if my tone was inappropriate, I apologize to myself and to you for that. But people are not going to use me to support their backwards, ignorance point of views as regard African peoples and Pan-Africanism. If you think that you're going to get me as an ally, you got the wrong black man. I am an African, born an African, will die an African. I am not FBA. I am not ADOS. And no matter how long you've been in the Americas or anywhere in the world, we came here from Africa. And anyone who wants to foolishly give up the identity of their grandmothers and grandfathers and their great-parents, I feel sad for you, because slavery and colonialism have impacted you in a greater way than we even think. And yet all of us have been impacted by it. But we need to be clear. Don't try to misuse me, Professor James Small. I do not support your backwards, ignorance, foolish point of view about the family and the race.
All right, family, and you know that's the video that he did. I think he did a live on Facebook, and that's some of the things he was saying. And again, I felt part responsible for him having to make this type of video, because I'm the one who put out the video that he's responding to of him on 125th Street saying the truths about Pan-Africanism. And here is my response to it. Number one, first and foremost, let me say, it is very true that Professor James Smalls has thousands of videos on the internet bigging up the continent of Africa and bigging up Black people globally. I have many of those videos and clips on my Voice of the Ancestors page. Okay? Very few videos that I even put on Voice of the Ancestors page is even criticizing the diaspora. Everything is about spreading knowledge, wisdom, and information and bigging up the diaspora on the Voice of the Ancestors page. Okay? Bigging it up. And that page runs on auto cycle, it runs on autopilot. My assistant runs it X, Y, and Z. So that page is constantly running and giving knowledge, wisdom, and information to help empower the diaspora. And Professor James Smalls has been featured on the page several times with hundreds of videos. But I think one of the issues is whenever I post a video of anybody, including Professor James Smalls, criticizing the diaspora and speaking truth to power about what's going on as it pertains in this video about Pan-Africanism, the diaspora runs and attacks Professor James Small. And in return, we as foundational Black Americans get the backlash of that. We get the backlash as it. Why is it that Professor James Smalls can put out thousands of positive videos bigging up Africa, the countries in Africa, the Caribbean, South America, and Black people globally? And the moment he has any critique for them, and I'm going to show you the video later, and he speaks truth to power about the reality of Pan-Africanism and how it relates to the diaspora, all of a sudden they attack him. And again, we get the backlash as foundational Black Americans for posting something he said. He said, which none of them really can debunk. Okay, none of them have come out, none of them come out and actually debunk the situation. They always just shame us for bringing it up. Okay, that says a lot. Also, one of the things that kind of triggered a lot of foundational Black Americans, Professor James Smalls, is the fact that you keep saying you're not a foundational Black American when you are. And you said on film many times, and we're going to show some of them, where you're saying you are a foundational Black American by lineage, because FBA is a lineage. And I know you know it's a lineage because you have my number and we've had these conversations several times. And after he put out this video, family, I actually got on the phone with Professor Smalls. This was last Friday, and we talked, and he confirmed with me that he is a foundational Black American. And he confirmed with me when he put out this video and put out the other video I'm going to show you, he was angry. And sometimes when you're angry, I understand you saying things that you don't mean. But what I'm going to show today as well is this is a constant cycle. This has become habitual for the esteemed elder Professor James Smalls, and that's why you're seeing a lot of the backlash you're seeing online. A lot of people have made a lot of videos. He's damn near been trending on Twitter and YouTube, where, I mean, as soon as you get on the timeline, it's people making Professor James Smalls videos. And again, I'm not going to disrespect the esteemed elder. This is one of my mentors. I've gotten a lot of game, knowledge, wisdom, and information, but we have to stand on foundational Black American business. And if you say something publicly that's not correct, we have to address it publicly. But again, I have talked to him privately as well, family. I have talked to him privately as well. And like I said, one of the growing frustrations is we've had this conversation with Professor James Small going back years now. And let me show you what I mean. Now, this is me and Professor James Small.
You understand.
One of our esteemed elders again. He's in the bottom right-hand corner. That's me. That's your brother Chase in the top right-hand corner. This is back in my youthful days. I'm still youthful now, but I had my twist in my head. And this is on Happy Talks. Shout out to Brother Taki. Shout out to Sister Felicia. Always show me a tremendous amount of love and support. This is actually the first person. This is the first group that I went to Africa with. I actually went to Egypt with them in 2022. Great people. Foundational Black Americans themselves. And they're based out of Harlem. And as you can see, one of our other esteemed elders who I have a personal relationship with, Professor Kaba's in the top left corner. And we're talking about FBA. And here's me in 2022. This is July of 2022, explaining and breaking down what is a foundational Black American. All right, listen up.
We'll get right into the question.
Right.
From your understanding and from your knowledge and wisdom, what is a foundational Black American?
Well, a foundational Black American is a lineage. Foundational Black American is a unique ethnic group. Essentially, take all the confusion out of it, a foundational Black American is a Black American who's a non-immigrant. He can trace his lineage back to the American system of slavery. This is a unique ethnic group. There was no United States of America before foundational Black Americans built the United States of America. And that's our own unique ethnic group. And that's important to understand. It has nothing to do with genetics. We're not making the argument that genetically we're not African or we're something different genetically from a Jamaican or a Haitian. But we're talking about our own unique ethnic group who has their own unique ties to this land. So that's what a foundational Black American is.
Okay. Now, with that being said, what is I want to make sure I say this right. What is ADOS, and how does those two, if they're connected, how are they connected, and what is the difference?
Well, ADOS is a lineage / organization. It kind of gets it kind of plays on those two lines, which is the reason why a lot of people use the term foundational Black American. Because when we say foundational Black American, I'm not talking about an organization, not a political party or anything like that. I'm strictly talking about a lineage. So ADOS is a lineage / organization. They have chapters and different things around the country, but their goals are kind of similar to ours at a certain point, which is reparations for foundational Black Americans. So one of the goals. So that's
All right. So as you can hear, family, I'm breaking down and I'm making sure I put a vast distinction on it. I understand some people are not going to agree with some of the things that I'm saying, and that's perfectly fine because as foundational Black Americans, we think different. We describe ourselves different. That's fine, family. But one thing we can agree on is we're speaking about a lineage, and I'm making sure to ring that home to Professor James Smalls. We're not talking about an organization. So when he says in these videos, I'm not part of FBA, you don't choose to be a part of FBA. You don't jump out of your FBA lineage, okay? You don't jump in and out of your lineage. Your lineage is your lineage, okay? We're not talking about a membership or organization. And keep in mind, again, family, this is in 2022. All right, let's continue.
essentially what ADOS is. It's more of an organization side.
So you mentioned reparations a second ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some of the chatter we hear surrounding this discussion is that from a foundational Black American standpoint, the issue of reparations is a real sticky point with other groups. Could you elaborate on that a little bit, Chase?
You're talking about some of the controversy behind foundational Black Americans going for reparations?
Yes. And some of the other groups saying maybe we don't deserve it or so forth. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, they've always telling us what we deserve and what we don't deserve. So we don't really get bothered by that. As foundational Black Americans, we're coming for what we are owed. And that's a part of our culture. That's a part of our spirit. That's foundational Black Americans. We don't allow people to tell us what we deserve to get and what we don't deserve to get. Oftentimes, especially in the global Black community, a lot of people who are non-FBA, who are trying to get their hands in on the reparation pot from the United States of America. And we're trying to keep it very specific. That's why we came up with the term foundational Black Americans, because the moment we allow any and everybody to get their hands on it, somebody who comes from maybe an immigrant lineage, that opens up the floodgates for everybody. And understanding as a foundational Black American, we understand this government, this system of white supremacy in this country better than anybody else. They're a master at using broad and ambiguous terms. So they'll say minority. They've been calling us minority. They'll call us people of color. They'll call us the urban community. And that could be anybody. That could be white women. That could be humpbacks, midgets, anybody that we think of. So we're making sure the language is very specific. We want reparations for foundational Black Americans specifically. Our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean islands, they have something called CARICOM. They're fighting for reparations going to brothers and sisters in the Caribbean. We're not interfering with that. We're not undermining that. We respect that. And so that's where kind of some of the controversy comes in. A lot of people think it's divisive. They should get reparations too. But we're talking about reparations for a specific group, which is foundational Black Americans who can trace their lineage back to the American system of slavery. And that's where we're starting at.
Okay, so that's me again, breaking it down and letting the elders know and the people who are listening know in a respectful manner that, the reasoning for the distinction, the reason for the delineation, okay, to highlight this specific group, family, because this government is known to use broad and ambiguous terms. And this is something that one of our other esteemed elders, Dr. Claude Anderson, teaches us in his book, Black Labor, White Wealth, Powernomics, and Others, okay, a Black history reader, classics. This government likes to use broad and ambiguous terms. He came up with a term. He used to use Native Black American. But a lot of times when we use the term Native Black American, a lot of people got confused. They were like, okay, you're talking about a Native American who's Black. What are you talking about? So our good brother Tariq Nasheed said foundational Black Americans to highlight this specific group of people. All right, so I'm breaking that down in the context and the background behind it. Okay, we didn't just wake up one day and we start talking about, man, I don't like Africans. I don't like people from the Caribbean. Let me delineate. No, okay. Everything was very strategic and very needed. Let's continue.
Right. Thank you.
And this is Professor James Smalls responding back to what I'm saying. Listen carefully to what he's saying.
If you look at some of my tapes from 20, 30 years ago, I was using the term formerly enslaved Africans in America, trying to.
Let's run that back one more time, family. He said he was, and again, this is one of the levels of frustration some people are having with Professor Smalls. We know this. He was using some of this same delineation type language. Let's run that back.
You know, if you look at some of my tapes from 20, 30 years ago, I was using the term formerly enslaved Africans in America, trying to do exactly what foundational Black America is trying to do, is find a way to define our ethnicity. Ethnicity now separate from what we call race. Okay, if I have brothers who are Yoruba, but in the modern nation state they're also Nigerian, and in the world of race they're also African. See no contradiction in that. And so the Africans in the United States of America, and that's what we're talking about when we talk about Foundation African American. And me, and I think Kaba also, I have lineage before the slave ship.
You know? He said he has lineage before the slave ship. This is something we as Foundational Black Americans constantly talk about. And it's the reason why we're highlighting our specific group. And I'll break that down because I actually broke down the flag to Professor James Smalls in this very same sentence. But I'm sorry to pause it so much, family, but I want y'all to listen to this because we're saying the same thing. But when we say it as Foundational Black Americans, we get told we're being cowards. We get told we don't want to be African. We get shamed. Okay? But listen to what Professor Smalls says. He's saying, verbatim, some of the same language that we're saying. And he was saying it before we were saying it.
I'm from the Chicora Nation, and they were as brown as I am today. I used to clean the mounds and the grave of my ancestors as a child. I can no longer go there now because the state have taken over our cemetery. You know? But that's cool. I never talk about my native identity because most people saw it in the early days as a denouncing of the African aspect of your identity. So I just stayed away from that.
You cooking.
But what Baba Kaba explained in his earlier conversation, that Dr. Clark explained in a very joking, historical way, that once we got us act together, we went and peopled the whole world. And so there's no surprise that we were in North America. We were everything else in the world, including Europe, Siberia. Okay, so what is the mystery that I come from a people in South Carolina who buried themselves in mounds and not graves and decorated with all kinds of items out of their home and their culture. And I knew that from the time I was a baby, and I cleaned those sacred places every year with my grandmother and grandfather. But I also have people like my great-grandma Hope, who came from Sierra Leone on the slave ship. And my Pat Joe, who came from Rwanda, Uganda, on a slave ship at 2 years old. I am all of those people.
There it is. Okay. That's just a little clip because we had a 3-hour conversation, family. A 3-hour conversation. And if you want to see that full conversation, you go to Happy Talk. Happy Talk, I believe it's called like Understanding FBA or something like that. And it's a conversation between me, Brother Taki, Professor James Smalls, Dr. Kaba, as well as myself. And even in that conversation, I went on to break down the flag because what he's talking about is he's saying he was on delineation and he was trying to find a name for this specific group of people. And he said he used to call it formerly enslaved. But every element that we say makes up Foundational Black American, he's mentioning now. Professor James Smalls is a Foundational Black American. And he understands, even in this conversation, you can hear that we're talking about a lineage, not a group, not an organization, not something that has memberships where you can, one day you can say I'm FBA and one day you say you're not. Okay? Here's the video of me talking about the flag. because it was a very detailed conversation. And I'm providing this information so we can add nuance to the conversation and we can show that we've been talking to Professor James Smalls, our esteemed elder, about this for years now. For years now. So there's going to be a level of frustration when you come out and you allude or you act like we're something that we're not. You act like we're this organization. You act like we are hating on Africans or denying Africans or attacking Africans. Okay, here's the video from the same video.
You're on mute before you start talking. Just wanted to remind you that why it's something that should be used, and why we move, and why foundational Black Americans move from that flag to the flag that they use.
Again, foundational Black American, I want to point out, to be specific, is a lineage. So in that lineage, you have many different people with many different ideologies. I'm fine with people using the RBG flag if that's what you choose to wave around in the air. That's perfectly fine. So I want to be real specific. It's a lineage, and in that lineage, you have people. I see people in the comment section saying I'm FBA by definition, but I have a difference of ideology. That's fine. Some people in our community do have a problem with the RBG flag and other things like that. I'm not very familiar with why they have particular problems with the flag necessarily, but we do have a FBA flag as well. So, and that's something that's unique for our culture. And if I could touch on a couple things real quick that I'm seeing, and I want to really get the point across so maybe the elders can hear and understand what a lot of the younger generation is dealing with, if I could, Brother Taki.
Okay, again, this is me breaking down some of the struggles that foundational Black Americans are dealing with and some of the attacks we face. Okay, and some of the untruths that are spread and pushed onto us, and people try to make the representation of what foundational Black American is.
Guys, Chase, Bill.
Okay, and number one, we're understanding and seeing this on the Pan-African level, looking at it in 2022 as foundational Black Americans. We understand that all skin folk and kinfolk. We have a lot of people, a significant number of people who come over here and they're Pan-Africanists when it's convenient. They're Pan-Africanists when they're at the border. They're Pan-Africanists when they need something. And then once they get that something and it's time for us to get something for ourselves, then we're divisive. Then we're agents. Then we're federal Black agents. That's what they say FBA stands for, federal Black agents. These are the types of things that we're seeing. And this is coming from so-called Pan-Africanists. And that's important to understand. There, like I said, there's a CARICOM movement going on about reparations. I have not seen one discussion among people from the diaspora talking about why that's divisive. We got our brothers over in South Africa, the EFF, the Economic Freedom Fighters. These brothers are fighting for reparations against the South African government. Nobody in the diaspora is saying, man, that's kind of divisive, man. Why are y'all doing that? Nobody says that until we do it. And I think a big problem learning from our history is, as foundational Black Americans, we have been way too open with our culture, with our lineage, whether it be music and art forms, whether it be history, politics, anybody can represent us. And because of that, we've got people within our circles who have hatred, who have disdain for us and work to undermine us at all times. We're seeing this in politics. There was a lieutenant governor out there in Virginia. They're speaking against reparations. We have people on the reparations board speaking against it who are non-FBA descent. This is a major problem. We have to call this type of stuff out. So we are on code with brothers who are on code with us. I really want to state that. I really want to build on that part of the game, because that part is always ignored in the names of Pan-Africanism. We've been made the face of Pan-Africanism. So every time, if we say something, if we do something that's specifically for us, just like everybody else does. If you go to Jamaica right now, they're dealing with politics that are specific for Jamaicans, not specific for Haitians and everybody else, and brothers and sisters in Britain, they're specific for Jamaicans. Politics in Haiti are specific for Haitians. When we talk about politics that are specific for foundational Black Americans, it becomes a worldwide issue amongst the diaspora. And I think that's very unfair. And that's something we're beginning to point out. Also, a lot of people have a beef. They have a problem with a particular foundational Black American, and they like to use him as a proxy. And we see a lot of that in the comment section, the name that kept being brought up. So they use him as a proxy in order to hate all foundational Black Americans. But like we said before, it is a lineage, it is an ethnic group. There are Haitians, and Brother Taki, you saw this on my page, who have said some horrible things about foundational Black Americans. I would never get out here and say Haitians are a hate group. I've seen some Jamaicans who have said some horrible things about foundational Black Americans. I would never say Jamaicans are a hate group. So don't do that to us as well. So I think that's very important to understand. But going back to the flag, if you could pull up the flag one more time, brother.
All right, so that's me breaking it down, and here I'm about to talk about the flag, explaining some of the very same things that Professor James Small said makes up him and his family tree and his family lineage is represented in the flag of FBA, the FBA flag.
Yes, it's coming up in a second.
Okay.
We're going to bring it back up. And while it's coming up, I just want to kind of say this, and this is where we started off in this discussion. Kind of want to just go back to that. The purpose of this is to address some of the issues and to outline a pathway, for healing, something that's going to bring us together. And the two elders really spoke to it very eloquently, and talking about the importance of it and just giving historical context of what it looked like for us in just ancient Kemet, people just coming together. So we do understand that there are some problems, but we need to address these problems and figure out a way. We got basically figure out a pathway forward. But here's the flag. Head, Chase.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, the flag, the 3 stars that you see at the top, these represent the 3 groups that were all amalgamated together, all combined together in this country. That's the Black Aboriginal people, or as Baba Small says, the Africans who were the first people here. And if you want more evidence or research on that, you can read Dr. David Imhotep's The First Americans Were Africans. Excellent read, excellent book. Lerone Bennett also talks about, again, like Baba said, the red and the black. And I believe that is in his book, The Shaping the Black America. You also have another great book called Before the Mayflower. That also talks about that. Then you have one of the stars in the middle is the star where we talk about the enslaved brothers and sisters who came from the continent of Africa, not just West Africa, but all over Africa. Then the other star is for the travelers and explorers who came here. African people used to vacation here, because if you know anything about the ocean currents, so they work as conveyor belts that swing people from one continent to another. We were traveling back and forth here for thousands of years. A lot of those brothers and sisters get mixed up. This is what some of our Moorish brothers and sisters talk about, being here, being reclassified. Those what the stars represent. The red stripes at the bottom represent the significant rebellions that came to shape America as we know it today, whether it be the Chesapeake Rebellion, whether it be the Seminole Rebellion, which is hidden. So you only see 8 stripes, but it's really 9 behind the fist, because the Seminole Wars represent the hidden rebellion, which Black folks, foundational Black Americans, actually won their freedom, okay, through Jessup's proclamation in 1838. This would give birth to the Emancipation Proclamation later on with Abraham Lincoln. Foundational Black Americans were down in Florida winning their freedom. The white in the background, the blue, the white, and the red color scheme represents a foundational Black American sister by the name of Grace Swisher. Okay, she was instrumental behind the original design of the American flag. We pay homage to that. So, these are some of the things. In 1526 is a date where we acknowledged one of the first rebellions of foundational Black Americans under a man by the name of Lupus Vasquez, I believe his name was, in Georgia, South Carolina area. In 1526, these foundational Black Americans came here in shackles and chains, broke those shackles and chains, and went to go live with the Aboriginal people who were already here. That's in 1526. So I think it's very important to understand, and we're highlighting our history. No different than what Haitians do when they talk about the 1804 revolution. No different than when Jamaicans show pride in Queen Nanny and the Maroons. We're doing the same thing. And I think that's important to understand. And people who are true Pan-Africanists shouldn't have a problem with us doing this. But again, a lot of people, I want to say, are fake Pan-Africanists. And only time they holler Pan-Africanism is when they have something to gain from it. But when it's nothing to gain from it, then all of a sudden we're divisive. And I think that's very disingenuous.
All right, boom. There we go. So that's me breaking down the flag, talking about these 3 groups amalgamating together to form the group that we now call as a foundational Black American, which Professor James Smalls himself, due to his own words, is acknowledging that he is FBA and acknowledging this ethnogenesis that happened here. In fact, like I've seen in previous videos and I've shown you, family, he says he was looking for terms to describe this specific group of our people, okay, and this unique lineage and heritage we have, okay? Now, moving forward, family, this conversation, like I said, happened in July of 2022. By this time, after this conversation happened, I thought it went real well, real good understanding. Got a lot of good game from the elders X, Y, and Z. They gave me their feedback. They acknowledged their foundational Black Americans themselves, and they liked the concept. You know, they didn't agree with everything, which is fine. And again, you can check out the whole 3-hour conversation, but they acknowledged what it represented and what we were talking about. And so 8 or 9 months later, in February or March of 2023, Professor James Smalls went on a show run by a guy and hosted by a guy named Omawale. And Omawale, I haven't seen him in a while, and you know, I disagree with a lot of his talking points, but I hope he's doing well because I haven't seen him in like a year or 2 years. He ain't put out a show since then. And he had a lot of disdain for foundational Black Americans. He had this thing, and he's a foundational Black American himself, but he's a big time Pan-Africanist, according to him. And he made a lot of shows, you know, referring to foundational Black Americans as federal Black agents, and we're holding up the guards and latching ourselves onto white supremacy, X, Y, and Z. He made several videos about Tariq as always. That's kind of like the typical starter kit that people do. They're going to talk about Tariq and how we're just blind followers of Tariq. And so Professor James Smalls went on that show due to the fact that our brother Sincere Love to God had a conversation with Omawale, and he brought up that, hey man, a lot of the elders were talking the same talk we're talking. A lot of the elders are riding with foundational Black Americans. Because by the way, family, before we even had this conversation in 2022, with me explaining the flag to him, Professor James Smalls, as well as Professor Kaba, shout out to Baba Kaba, were both at the FBA conference in 2020, the Foundational Black American Conference, the first conference Foundational Black Americans had, okay, using that name. That was in 2020. Professor James Smalls was a speaker at that conference. So again, we understand he knows what Foundational Black Americans means and what it represents and when it doesn't represent, okay? And so our brother Sincere was going and explaining to him like, hey man, a lot of the elders are behind this. They're speaking on this. Also, as well, in 2022, later on that year after we had this conversation, Professor James Smalls was also a speaker at the FBA Rally for Reparations. I'll put a flyer up. He was one of the speakers in Washington, D.C. when we were rallying for reparations. Okay? So a lot of people were caught off guard in 2023 when he went on Omawale's show and he said this.
These are four of the most common like anti-African sentiments we hear being expressed by some of our brothers and sisters. The first,
in notice, you're going to notice the bad faith talking points, trying to, you know, basically swindle the elder into attacking us. This is what they do a lot of times. And I had a conversation with Professor Smalls about this, and he claimed that, well, nobody's swindling him into doing anything. But I said the way that they even ask these questions are very disingenuous. They're trying to get a response out of Professor Smalls. Watch this. Listen up.
First one is, these are four of the most common like anti-African sentiments we hear being expressed by some of our brothers and sisters. The first one is, Black people in America are not African and have no connection to Africa. We're Native Black Americans. That's
disingenuous. We say genetically everybody's African, and genetically we have some African blood, but ethnically we are unique. We are foundational Black Americans. We are not ethnically African. Okay, we're not continental Africans. We've been over here before any of those, damn near most of those ethnic groups and countries even existed. Okay, so again, bad faith, but okay.
One. The second one is, Black people in America may be genetically African, but so is the entire planet. Everybody on Earth is African. That's two. The third one is, African people on the continent don't refer to themselves as Africans. We're the only ones who call ourselves Africans. That's three. And the fourth one is, Black Americans are the only ones who practice Pan-Africanism. Those are the four most common kind of like retorts that we hear. And they always say, well, Baba James Smalls agrees with us. Like,
well, Baba James Smalls is going to tell him I don't agree to none of that shit I just heard.
Okay, and that triggered a lot of foundational Black Americans. And again, this is like February, March 2023 when he said that, and I'll show you why after I let the video play all the way through. I'll show you why.
None of it makes sense. And it alludes to the ignorance of not knowing your history. You know, it alludes to the fact that you don't realize that Kwame Nkrumah, Jomo Kenyatta, Nyeri were all at the Pan-African Conference in Manchester. And when they all walked away from that conference, they led some of the most fierce revolutions on the continent of Africa based on Pan-Africanism. That we got defeated in many sectors by the enemy at the ideological level. We won at the physical base ground level. We got our land back. We got political independence back. We're still fighting for economic, cultural, and intellectual independence from these people. What is so sad, and normally if you ever see me lecture, I got 1 or 2 books. Whatever subject I'm talking about, I got a book, because y'all need to read, you know, because if you don't know history, how are you going to lead anybody politically? That's the sad part about many of the young people. They don't know history. This thing, I'm from South Carolina. I'm from a population that was here in this country before the Mongolians came to this country, an African population.
And notice how these two Pan-Africanists, they're shaking their head and agreeing. And I remember verbatimly when these two Pan-Africanists used to say that we were pseudo for saying that. They would say that the first people of America weren't Africans or weren't black people. I'm using African to describe as a descriptor, to describe how a particular group of people look. Same thing Professor James Smalls is doing, black African. He's using to describe how a particular group of people look. Okay, but notice how they're shaking their head. And this is what a lot of these folks do. They'll bring the elders on the show and they'll act as if they've been kind of saying the same thing when they know they haven't. And in fact, when we come on the show and we actually say, hey, Foundational Black Americans, we have a lineage here that goes back before Columbus. We actually have indigenous ties to this land. Oh man, y'all pseudo. Y'all don't know what y'all talking about. Then the elder gets on and he acknowledges his indigenous heritage. He acknowledges his ties to the land that go back and predate Columbus. Okay, because that's all indigenous means. The people who once inhabited the land before it was colonized. Okay, that makes you an indigenous person. Then they sit up there and shake their head and they don't say nothing. See, they don't keep that same energy. And then everything bad, disingenuous talking points they push onto us. All right, that's what they do. But let's continue.
I know who they are. I grew up attending their grave, the mounds where they bury themselves, because our grandfather made sure we clean them every year. I'm also from a population that came in later on with chains on them from Sierra Leone and with chains on them from Uganda. And I know them. These are my great-great-grandparents. I'm only the 4th generation born. Mama first, Ning second. I'm the 3rd generation African born in this country. From those Sierra Leone Mendi people I'm from those Tutsi people I'm from in Uganda. And I've been out and found my family. So, and for those people who had come by the boats into the Bahamas, into what is Haiti, and made it up through Florida to North America before the Mongolians came across the Bering Strait. They're the same people. They came from the same Sierra Leone, the same Ghana, the same, you understand? The Malian people who came in between those 2 episodes came from the same West African kingdoms.
Yes.
So I don't understand where their brains are when they say, I'm not an African.
And again, this is after we've had the conversation on Happy Talks. And a lot of people pointed to this at the time, like, hey, you just had a conversation with Brother Chase on Happy Talks, where he just explained we incorporate all those groups. We acknowledge those groups and say we were amalgamated into one group that we now call Foundational Black Americans. The Black people who were indigenous, the Black people who came through the transatlantic slave trade. And remember, family, when we talk about the transatlantic slave trade, we're talking about 4 to 6% of the people or the Africans who were enslaved actually came to the United States of America. The majority of those Africans actually went to the Caribbean and South America. Yet we are the group who they overly Africanized the most. That's a fact. Okay? 4 to 6%. Even then, we acknowledge that. We acknowledge that upbringing. We acknowledge they amalgamated and became what we call Foundational Black Americans by merging with other groups of Black people who were already here and the travelers and explorers, which he is mentioning now. He's mentioning all the groups that we talk about. and the amalgamation of these groups to become what we call a foundational Black American. So it's very, very interesting, okay, when they say we don't acknowledge these people.
And all this tells me is that self-hate, self-ignorance, lack of understanding of African history and of history in general are what we're dealing with people who have taken some, what do you call it, clips?
Yeah.
Little sound bites from the internet, and now they've become historians and political leaders because they can get a bunch of people to, when you push the little button for them, subscribe.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's insanity. That's why you see me out here, because I didn't do a lot of stuff on the internet. Or brother says snippets. I like that even better. Okay, snippets. Because I was very quiet for a while. And then I go like, I can't stay quiet. So in the last year and a half, I've just been out here trying to teach as much as I can. And everything has to go back to the history. Yes, we were the first. We're the Aborigine everywhere in the world. Hell, we're the Aborigine in Europe. We're the Aborigine in China. But that don't make us non-Africa, because everybody that walked on the planet Earth walked out of Africa, yes. But the people who we're talking about, those who are not the mutants, people want to go there, let's go there. You're going to tell me that something got trapped in the ice, mutated, and then decide to declare war on nature, on God itself. And the war is against me and you, the African, because they see us as the epitome of the authenticity of the divinity itself. We got to know what we're really up against. Mm-hmm. They don't have a clue, most of the young people who are using these labels, partially because they feel hurt and rejected by their own people who feel hurt and rejected by them.
And we would respectfully disagree with the elder. I think the person who understands, or the group of people who understand more than any other group of people on the face of the earth about systematic white supremacy are foundational Black Americans, because we've been in the belly of the beast. We don't live in a majority Black country. You dig? We're surrounded by tanks and machine guns and jets and a white oppressive government. We live in the belly of the beast. Okay? Foundational Black Americans do. Let's be clear.
You, the brothers and sisters who come from the continent of Africa, they're looking, but we have not reached out to help them. We have no welcoming wagon for them. So if the enemy takes them and give them counseling and guidance and jobs and stuff, we gonna blame the hungry man?
And again, notice what he said, family. He's saying that we shouldn't be upset with brothers and sisters who come here from the Caribbean, from Africa, or wherever, Black immigrants, and they come here inside with white supremacy, because we haven't done anything for them. And I'm summarizing, but we haven't done anything for them. This triggered, again, a lot of foundational Black Americans, because, again, the point of this is we're going through the history of some of the conversations, some of the things Professor James Smalls has said that has troubled us, so that we can get a deeper understanding, and he could get a deeper understanding. Because sometimes some of the elders, they just forget things, and they forget things that we've said in some of the conversations that we've had. Okay? When you say these types of things that are not true, when you talk about us not helping them, hell, the reason they're here is because we helped them. How did they get here? For us, or for Professor James Smalls to give the white man the credit for being the reason they're over here and able to make a living, that is offensive to a lot of foundational Black Americans. And again, this is back in 2023, after we've already had the conversation in 2022 on Happy Talks, family. These are some of the things that were said.
Or should we blame ourselves because we weren't the one there to say, welcome, brothers and sisters. Here's how we're going to get you a job. Here's how we're going to find you a place to live. Here's how we're going to help you get your children in school. Here's how we're going to get you on your feet and get started. Well, we left that to the enemy. And now we're mad with our brothers and sisters because they didn't stay there and died and starved to death. No, we have to get our brains straight. We have to understand what being an African means. You know, the melanin is essential to our Africanization because we are the universe itself, yes. But being an African means the thing we describe as God, that's what being an African means.
Mm.
That thing we call the divinity, that's the character of the African itself. That's our culture. And people are afraid because that means you got to change your little black behind into something better than what the white man has created you to be. You're going to give me the white slop and then give it a name like Foundation of Black America. Don't label me with slop. Now, if you use that because you're trying to find an identity, I'll help you with that. Because you deserve to have your own identity like everybody.
Yes.
But don't bring the same white slop along saying you're anti-African, you are not African, you're not from Africa. That's the white slop that they've been trying to push in our brain from day one. Throw that slop out, empty and wash your bucket, and let us bring some real black stuff up in there.
All right, and then that's a little clip, and I think the full video is still up on Mawale's page. But again, so a lot of people were upset back in 2023 when he made these comments, because we're like, hey man, Professor James Smalls is an esteemed elder that we hold near and dear, and you're pushing these narratives that help to misrepresent what we're talking about and what foundational Black Americans stand for. And you're using the foundation in which he's setting on Mawale, these talking points, as a excuse to attack what we're doing and what we're saying. And what's interesting is, if we go back, let's go back to those talking points, and then I'm going to play a video.
These are four of the most common like anti-African sentiments we hear being expressed by some of our brothers and sisters. The first one is Black people in America are not African and have no connection to Africa. We're Native Black Americans. That's one. The second one is Black people in America may be genetically African, but so is the entire planet. Everybody on Earth is African. That's two. The third one is African people on the continent don't refer to themselves as Africans. We're the only ones who call ourselves Africans. That's three. And the fourth one is Black Americans are the only ones who practice Pan-Africanism. Those are the four most common kind of like retorts that we hear. And they always say, well, Baba James Smalls agrees with us. Like,
well, Baba James Smalls is going to tell him I don't agree to none of that shit I just heard.
Oh, okay. And this is actually the video that Professor James Smalls caused him to do that Facebook Live where he said he was not foundational Black American. This is Professor James Smalls back in 2015. He's on 125th Street out in Harlem. Okay, listen up. This is Professor James Smalls. Remember, he said he doesn't agree with any of that stuff. Okay, and this is another reason why back in 2023, a lot of people were like, whoa, Baba Smalls, what are you talking about?
You are always in Africa. You got the African Day Parade. You don't see the Africans. You got the festival that be going on in Brooklyn, the band festival, the African festival. Where's the Africans at? When we doing our rallies and our marches, where's the Africans at on your side? Talk to us really about that, man.
See, let me tell you something. We think slavery in America was something. Slavery in Africa is still in force. You talking about deaf, blind, and dumb. Don't confuse you because somebody got on some printed cloth that's printed in Holland or India that you're looking at an African cultural expression. That's not an African cultural expression. That cloth was printed in a European country and then sold to Africans. And they've accepted that as their cloth. You understand what I'm saying? Just that piece. Now, they do speak the language, but they know less about their history than you and I do. So you've got a deaf, blind, dumb, backwards person speaking an African language, coming from the African country, came here to be a parasite on their own people with no respect for themselves as human beings, and then because they speak a language, try to play you off like they got something culturally that you don't have. The most culturally enforced African in the world is the African American. Most of the movements that have changed the world, that allow all ethnic nations to profit, has been our movement.
Okay, and this again, this goes back to what he was saying, that we haven't done anything for him, but he's saying different now. He's talking about how our movements have helped to progress all of these other groups around the world, not just Black immigrants who come here, but all these other groups around the world.
And so we get peed on and played down because these people are so punked out and scared of the white man that they feel because they're scared of the white man, they got to be against us.
Are they our people, brother, or are we our own people now?
right? You heard what Sonetta asked. Are they our people or are we our own people now? Okay. Listen to Professor Small's response.
We got to understand two things. We have a race and then we have an ethnic place. We African Americans. Just like a guy from Africa, he can say he's African.
When he says African American, well, we're saying the same thing. Foundational Black American.
But there's no country called African. He's either Nigerian, Ghanaian, Malian, or something. That's his ethnic nation.
Right. So that goes to show that what we were saying in the video, the guy said they don't identify as African on the continent. They go by their ethnic nation, their ethno nation. And if we're being more specific, they really go by their tribes. Yeah, when they travel around the continent, they might say I'm Nigerian or I'm Gambian or something like that. But if they're in Nigeria, they say I'm Igbo, I'm Hausa. You dig? When there are other places, I'm Fulani or whatever other group, Zulu. Okay, they don't identify as just some generic African on the continent of Africa. They don't walk around and just say, I'm just African. Okay, they have an ethnogenesis. They respect their ethnogenesis, and they say, I'm Nigerian or I'm Igbo, to be more particular. All right, that's exactly what we were saying, and he said he didn't agree with any of that.
Racially, we are together, but economically, we may well be enemies. And we have to be clear on that, that our economic enemy is just that. And if you deal with your economic enemy like it's your friend, you're going to be the loser at the end of the day. Now, we raised the question of Pan-Africanism in this hemisphere. You know, we had the brothers from Trinidad, and then you had W.B. Du Bois, and we created this phenomena. But Africa has never created a Pan-African movement. You know?
Okay. So like he was saying, Pan-Africanism is an American thing, or the Americas. An America's thing. It is not a continental African thing. Listen to what he's saying.
Understand? Africa has never really supported a Pan-African movement. We had a couple of people in Nkrumah and Julius Nyerere and Mugabe, but most of Africa never gave a damn about a Pan-Africanism because they're still bogged down in the colonial slavery of European Judeo-Christian indoctrination, which is worse than anything that we've suffered. Worse than anything that we've suffered. The illusion of the clothes and the language make us think we're dealing with somebody that has some African purity culturally and spiritually. You're dealing with a confused, backwards Christian that love Europe more than they love their own ancestors. They would not even use an African word for God. You know, in Ghana, if you talk about being a traditional African, you might get beat down in the street. You understand? You're ostracized on the radio. Movies are made to show African culture as being the devil, while Christian culture is coming in as the savior. This is TV shows and on TV in Nigeria and Ghana every day.
Okay, so that's Professor James Smalls 10 years ago. Okay, so a lot of people felt some type of way back in 2023 when he said it. Professor James Smalls, he came out, he kind of cleared the air. He had a conversation with our brother Tariq Nasheed. This is back in 2023, right after that conversation. Said, hey, man, I didn't mean to come off that way. All was forgiven. I'm going to play a little clip of that, and then we'll move on. So a lot of people, kind of let it go.
It was, you were on a broadcast on a YouTube stream, and there was a dude who's kind of known in our circles as being a troll. And he gave you some real... He basically lied to you and gave you some misinformation about some of the stuff that we've said, and then tried to use you against me, and some of these other trolls tried to use your words against me. How do you feel about that, sir?
Right. Well, part of it is the young man, Omawale, called me yesterday. And his position when he says, I wasn't the one putting that out there like that. And I said, what do you mean? I said because, I couldn't find him. I had the name wrong.
Yeah.
And when I found the name in my phone, he called me just as I found the name. And he says, listen, because I did this little piece, I was trying to get it right on Twitter, calling people out for doing that. Because I'm saying, wait a minute, that was not what really happened.
Right.
Now, he did raise these things about foundational Black American. And I go like, these are my children, I think is the term I use, and I love them. You got to understand it. If I think my children have any issues, I'm going to argue with them to get the issues right. Right? If they made any statements wrong that and I'm not going to stab them in the back or talk to them about behind their back. I tell them my love for you, our relationship, and so forth. And whenever I have any issues, I talk to you about it. Sometimes you be quiet, sometimes you take me on, but we've never had a negative.
Right, of course.
You and I.
Of course.
And you know the things I disagree in, and they ain't really big things. That's the issue. Well, then I really argue with you about one thing, the N-word, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes I think you lose your temper a little bit too much on some of these Negroes who don't deserve you putting that energy on. Mm-hmm. And those have been our two issues. Yeah. And we deal with this going back. And I remember when you were having an issue, but I think we won't even call his name, but a little brother out there. Yeah. And I call you and I talked to you about it, and you squashed that. Yeah. There was an issue with some sister who was coming after you about some stuff. I called you this a couple of years ago. You squashed that. Mm-hmm. They didn't squash it, but you did. Yeah. So I have to let people understand and be clear, because I got some crazy calls from all over the world. When I was coming to Washington, you're not going there. And I look, wait a minute, I had to do almost had to do a Tariq Nasheed. I had to go up on some folks. Who the hell are you to tell me where I go, who I speak with, and why? Mm-hmm. Now, if you call me and say, Brother Small, I heard something about Tariq, is that right? I would have told you, no, that ain't right. Mm-hmm. You've been misinformed. And so when I did the show with the young people, because they'd call me, and I do a lot of shows with young people call me, and most of the times I don't know who they are beforehand, and a lot of times it's the first time. Yeah. And some have played me out of pocket, because they just want to say I got Professor Small on there and blah, 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 blah. Right. And on this show, when the issue came up, and I tell them, when I want to speak to you and make a criticism, I do it to your face. Mm-hmm. I'm not a backstabber, I'm going to tell you, and I'll say right out in the public that I own it. Mm-hmm. That's how men do. Right. That's how men be. And then we had a pretty, what I thought was a decent discussion with me explaining what Pan-Africanism is, explaining what Foundation of Black American is, and telling them I'm both. Mm-hmm. Because for me, Pan-Africanism is how we unite the Black people all over the world to be one force. Right. Now, we can call it Pan anything we want to, but all the Pan means is unity, nothing else. And that Foundation of Black American, that we have a right to identify ourselves in the same way any other ethnic group. And I think I used the Jamaican community. They don't call themselves African, they call themselves Jamaicans. Right, absolutely.
So as you can see, Professor James Smalls, he came on, he smoothed it out. He helped to explain, add some clarity to what he was saying. He confirmed that he is a Foundation of Black American. He understands what we have going on. Again, he spoke at the Foundation of Black American rally at the end of 2022. He was in the film. You can actually see the film behind Brother Tariq that had just come out at the time, American Maroon. I'm actually in that film as well with Professor James Smalls. And we're talking about foundational Black American history, our indigenous ties to the land. Everything that we discuss and talk about as foundational Black Americans, not dissing Africans at all in that movie. Nobody's throwing a shot at Africans. No one's saying anything negative about anybody in the diaspora in that film. We're just highlighting our history. He's a part of that conversation, Professor James Small. So everything is cool and copacetic. And so fast forward to this year again, I post the video that I've always posted. I've posted that video several times. I keep my videos kind of in cycles. I have thousands of videos. And I guess this time, some Africans felt a certain type of way about him discussing these truths about Pan-Africanism, which caused Professor James Smalls to make that Facebook Live speaking on it, okay? But what really kind of, a lot of people were like, oh, okay, cool, Professor Smalls, Professor Smalls kind of does this every year and a half. We kind of used to it at this point. But then he took it a step further this year, and which really caused a lot of people like the Black Authority, Brother Tariq Nasheed, unfortunately, to cut off Professor James Smalls or say he's not rocking with Professor James Smalls, and caused a lot of backlash in the community. Was this video that he did with this guy who is Kenyan. I think he's in Kenya right now. And Professor James Smalls went on to say that FBA, and we might have a link to the CIA or the U.S. State Department. Let's listen to that, okay?
I don't know whether you're active online and in social media, but if you are, you've probably seen this petty beef, between Africans and African Americans. And
you have to rephrase that. Some Africans and some
Yes,
Africans.
some. Very few. But you see, the problem is, Prof. And like, I don't know if I told you this when we were speaking on phone, but if I didn't, let me tell you that even if it's few, because you told me it's 99% of us who are on the right track, and it's 1% who are on the wrong track and who are really spewing a lot of divisive messages.
And as a side note, family, I told you, these folks outside, these non-FBAs, these Kenyan, they love diaspora wars. They're always trying to bring up something about a diaspora war. Or he even said, I have to tell you about this beef that Black Americans are having with African. It's no beef. We don't beef with y'all. We don't think about y'all. Okay, there is no beef. There's a one-sided thing where you attack us and we just simply respond to your attacks. Okay? But they're always bringing it up. Every time they get an elder on here, they're never asking him about, hey, man, tell us about Kenyan history or X, Y, and Z. They're always trying to bring up some little online beef that they want to have with us. All right? So here we go.
But that 1%, Prof, is very, very consistent online. I mean, you would think that.
Yeah. But the reason they are, because they're busy fighting their game and we're busy reacting to their game. Let's fight our game. Let's tell our story. Let's talk about Africa. Let's talk about African Caribbeans, African Americans, African Latinos, and how we are striving to get closer and work together, how our cultures have survived all over the world, how our cultures survived from Brazil to Puerto Rico to Cuba to Jamaica to Haiti to South Carolina to Mississippi to Alabama. Why don't we tell our side?
And I agree with Professor James Smalls, Foundational Black Americans. We are not stopping any motion with Pan-Africanists on the continent. Okay, you see this Negro bucking his eyes on this Kenyan brother bucking his eyes. Okay, we're not stopping anything. Okay, but the reality is we are the true Pan-Africanists. And they have this fear that if Foundational Black Americans are not on Pan-Africanism, there is no Pan-Africanism. Okay, because we are the sole Pan-Africanists. They don't have no, again, as Professor Small said in his other videos, they don't have no Pan-Africanism like that on the continent of Africa. They have one or two individuals, okay, but as a collective, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Tribalism runs rampant on the continent of Africa. There's wars going, there's tribal wars going on right now in South Sudan, in Congo. You dig? Hell, just the other month, Ghanaians were kicking out Nigerians. They're always infighting and doing some type of fighting on the continent of Africa. Okay? Don't let them fool you. So when you tell them to worry about themselves, they like, no, they got to worry about us. See, we're the only people they can latch on to. All right? That's why he's bucking his eyes looking crazy. That's why they always bringing us up. They always have to bring up Foundational Black Americans. Even though he claims we're just 1%. He's just 1%, but they're so powerful. Lord. But let's let Professor James Smalls continue, okay? Because this is going to get unfortunate.
And yes, we were there before Columbus, but we were everywhere before Columbus. So why is it so important that we were in North America? We were in South America, we were in Brazil, we were in Cambodia, we were in China. And so what we're dealing with, you've always had those who was ashamed of being African. But it isn't just that. A part of it is the reaction between what we call the immigrant ideology versus an indigenous ideology. The Africans who have been in America for the last 500 years feel that the Africans who come to America in the last 5 years do not ally themselves with them, but ally themselves with our enemies. That's what's at the crux of this. All right? It isn't just the denial. And so, and it isn't that the Africans who are arriving lately is allying themselves with our enemies, because they don't perceive, just like we don't know our history in America. How do we expect the guy from Kenya or Nigeria to know the African American history? We don't know the history. So our people come, they're trying to ally themselves with the advantage. So are you going to, if you go into a community to get rich, are you going to ally yourself with the impoverished person in the community or the rich person in the community? And so it's a lack of understanding. It's a lack of interaction that needs to take place more often so we can understand. Yes, even African Americans, we ally ourselves with the white man. So how are we going to get mad because the Nigerian brother allies himself with the same white man? But that's that.
And you see the Kenyan, he's, oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Listen, and Professor James Smalls knows this. He's doing it. He's doing it. For example, now Baba Smalls, where we become frustrated is when we align ourselves with white people, we get called out for it as foundational Black Americans. Just like you might feel that some foundational Black Americans align themselves with white men. You're calling us out now. That's what you're doing on this video. You're calling us out now for things that we're saying and doing that you feel like is wrong. However, when the shoe is on the other foot and we're calling out Black immigrants, we get called divisive. We get called a hate group. We get called CIA, U.S. State Department. And that's part of the thing that grows our level of frustration with you, Elder. And when you say things like that, it's disingenuous. It's hypocritical. We can't have this standard where when foundational Black Americans, we can call out each other all day. Everybody can call us out for the wrongdoings we're doing. But then when we call out somebody else, we have to walk on eggshells. Oh, we're stirring division then. Okay? Same way we call out our coon class who worked as collaborators with the white government, we're calling out the immigrant tethers. We're calling them out too, because they're no good for us. But the reality is a lot of the immigrants who come over here are part of the tether class. See, that's the thing. That's the thing nobody wants to talk about. And I've always said a lot of them, family, they act as if they come over here on some Marcus Garvey type stuff. None of them really come over here on no Garveyism. They come over here and they side with the white people, as Professor James Smalls has acknowledged. Many of them do. You have exceptions to every rule. You have riders in every class. But many of those immigrants, they come over here and side with the white people for tangible benefits and gains and economic relief. And we get told, well, we can't say nothing about it. We just got to shut up and deal with it because we're going to mess up the illusion of Pan-Africanism. And unfortunately, we can't do that anymore. But let's continue.
That's what's at the crux of it. You understand? So the perception that, oh, we fought for these advantages, but you come to America and you're allowed to have this advantage that we fought for because they are scared of us and they're not afraid of you. Because they can take advantage of you because you need a green card so you can't fight back. But they can't take advantage of me because I can fight back. These are all of the little nuances, right? But none of them understand it enough to explain it like you and I are now doing. And so that's why we have to tell our side of the story. We have to say, we see what's going on, but you don't hate your brother because he's lost his sight. You grab his hand and give him guidance. Where?
And again, and I've broken this down, Professor, we don't hate immigrants. Yeah, I said that in the Happy Talk. We don't hate any group. Okay?
Have the African American open up a refugee center for our brothers and sisters coming from home and need help and assistance. So how are we going to complain if they go to the Indian or the Chinese or the white man for aid when we have not set up any place to aid him?
And again, Professor Smalls, this is part of our level of frustration. The United States is their place of aid. Black immigrants would not be able to come here if it wasn't for the sacrifices and benefits of yourself, who was on the ground during the 1960s stomping, okay? If it wasn't for other foundational Black Americans who sacrificed their lives so they can come over here and have tangible gains and benefits granted to them by the Civil Rights Movement. And I don't have to break this down to Professor Smalls. Professor Small knows this. So when you say things like we never created any refugee, the United States was their refugee. And Black immigrants have never not had access to any of our resources, tangibles, or communities in the United States of America. They have always been able to go in and out of foundational Black American community, towns, and institutions. They're at the HBCUs now with their own organizations. They've always had open access to us. Anytime you see, as you said in that video, anytime you see Black immigrants with their own little separate thing, it's because they chose to do that. Anytime you see a little Haiti, not because they were exiled from the Black American community, they chose to have their little segregated enclave. Okay? Anytime you see any of these Black immigrants with their own separate churches, like we have down here in Atlanta, you have Nigerians with their own Christian churches. They chose to do that. They didn't want to worship with the Black Americans, with foundational Black Americans, even though they claim we're both Christian. They chose to have their own little segregated thing. We've never exiled them. We have to speak truth to power about this, Baba. Let's continue.
Or her when they come and they have no place to stay and they're looking for a job. You understand? So if the whites give them that support, then naturally they're going to advise themselves with the whites. And then the African Americans saying, oh, you ally yourself with my racist enemy and you are against me. That's a big part of what's going on. That's not true across the board, because many of the brothers and sisters who are Muslim have been able to blend very well with the African Americans who are Muslims. But the African Americans and many of the brothers and sisters on the continent who's from the Christian community have not been able to blend very well. And that's the majority community. And so this fight between the whites and us, our people are caught in the middle of that fight. You understand? And we're saying our people are siding with our enemy. They're not siding with the enemy. They don't even know what the hell's going on. They don't even know we got to fight. And so it's our job to tell the history, tell the story, have the political discussions on forums like this so people get a better understanding of what the conflict is. And then you got the African American.
And Professor Smalls, again, in this video, when you give them a so-called pass, that frustrates a lot of foundational Black Americans because you were speaking very differently. When they say they don't know what's going on, yes, they do. Black immigrants are not stupid. They're not unintelligent. In fact, many Black immigrants who come to this country, they're some of the smartest people in their country. They understand the game and how to play the game. And you know this, Professor Smalls, you know, because you put out videos on this. Here's Professor Smalls again. Here we go. Listen up.
So what happens when Blacks come from other places, they tend to ally themselves with white people because that's where they can get the jobs. So they pretend, oh, you Black people don't want us. And so that, no, you're there because you didn't come here to be a brother to me. You didn't come here to be a comrade to me. You didn't come to be an ally to me in my crisis. You came here because you were an economic refugee or a political refugee, but in most times you were an economic refugee. And since the means of production and the economy of the United States of America is predominantly controlled by white Americans, that's who you'll ally yourself with. So don't make excuses about why you're doing it. Just tell the truth. Know the truth. Truth will set you free. And in fact, Malcolm told us that truth alone will set us free. Mm-hmm. So let's get the truth first.
There we go. This is Professor Smalls. So this is why we're sometimes as foundational Black Americans, and I've had these conversations. Like I said, I love Professor Smalls. Still going to be my elder, still somebody I talk to, and I hope he accepts this with love because I'm showing receipts. I'm not trying to angle him or ambush him. But when we hear videos like this, we're like, Professor Smalls, come on now. Bob, come on now. Let's speak truth to power now. They're not dumb. Black immigrants are not dumb or stupid. They understand how the game goes and how to play the game. And this is something Professor Smalls, again, this is another video of him acknowledging this. This is from Clemson Brown. I don't know what year this is. I'm thinking this is like the early 2000s when they're doing this. It's tap videos. Shout out to Clemson Brown, FBA brother, who a lot of those videos that you see on Dr. Ben and John Henry Clark back in the day doing lectures, those are from Clemson Brown. Tap videos, transatlantic production video. Okay, so here's Bible speaking truth to power. Here's another full. I think this is the full version. Hold on.
We are talking about the formerly
and this is, again, Professor Small breaks down why some Black Americans are unwelcoming to Black immigrants.
We're talking about the formerly enslaved Africans in the United States of America. That's who the African American is. And we must.
And did you peep what he said? This is what he meant when he said African American. But we had to change the term because you had a lot of people, the term was becoming muddy. Okay, when he says African American, who was Professor James Smalls talking about?
And we are talking about the formerly enslaved Africans in the United States of America. That's who the African American is. And we must assert our identity. If you're from Jamaica, you're not an African American. If you're born in Jamaica, if you're from Nigeria, you're not an African American. You're a Nigerian American. And if you're from Jamaica, you're a Jamaican American. There's only one group whose legal title is African American, and that's the formerly enslaved Africans in the United States of America, because that is a culture unto itself. That is a historical epic and episodes unto itself. And so we allow people to have us deny our identity as African Americans, while other Africans come from other places and try to assume that identity for economic reasons and political reasons. And yet,
there it is, family. For economic reasons and political reasons, we have to deny our identity. That's why many of them don't like the term foundational Black Americans, because it's highlighting our uniqueness and it's very specific. They can't co-opt it. See, African American, you might have somebody who's Nigerian who comes to America, they get citizenship. They're technically an African in America. They're an African American. Okay? So now they can take on our identity when it's beneficial. However, if African American is too negative at the time, it's too, muddy at the time, something they don't like, they can say, well, I'm Nigerian. They can step out of that African American title and say, well, I'm Nigerian. I'm from Nigeria. I'm a continent. I'm the real African. I've heard that term several times. Okay. While we at the same time, we can't really have an identity. We have to be this generic African where they can step in and out of our identity when they see fit. And they can't do that with FBA because that's a very unique lineage. Okay?
Yet do not ally themselves with the African American in most instances. That those immigrant African community tend to ally themselves with the European American, not understanding what the historical relationship between the African American and the European American is, or the war, the cultural war and the spiritual war and the economic war and the political war that still exists between those two communities. So when you're an African from another place and you come and say, well, I can't get caught up in that, I'm here to make money, then you ally yourself with someone I'm at war with and wonder why I treat you a certain way. Mm-hmm. So you need to understand what you have just done. Besides disrespecting me in my country, something I would never do to you in your country. I would not go to Senegal and choose the side of the French against you. I would not come to Jamaica and choose the side of the Brits against you. So why would you come to America and choose the side of the white American for whatever reason, economic, political, cultural, or whatever, against me and my interests, and then tell me I'm unwelcoming to you? I welcome my friends and my brothers and sisters. I do not welcome my enemies, whether they look like me or not. Let's get that clear up front.
There it is. Okay, I can't even say it no better myself. Professor James Small. So a lot of people are, scratching your head like, hold on now, Professor Small. Some of the things that you're saying are in direct contradiction to what you said in the past. Okay, what you said in the past. But let's continue with the CIA talk.
So just playing ignorance, but we don't know how much American State Department or Justice Department is involved in Foundation of Black America. Who's getting paid the money to say what they're saying? There's a paper, it's a white paper, you could probably find it online. It was done by a man named Brzezinu Brzezinski. He was the national security director under Jimmy Carter. And his white paper, the first paragraph, he said that the policy of the United States of America is that African American and Africans should never unite politically, culturally, or economically. That is still the policy of the government of the United States. So what you're seeing ain't quite what you see, and there's only a piece of what you see. You understand what I'm telling you?
I do.
Just because they come in a black
big news.
A black face,
Yeah,
mean
and
CIA, all right? A black face don't mean you ain't the FBI, okay? Wearing a dashiki don't mean you're a nationalist, okay? So once you get clear on these things, that's why studying history is important.
And pause right there. And in fairness to Professor Smalls, like I said, family, I talked to him last Friday for about an hour, and I told him we were going to be having these conversations about some of the comments he made recently. And as well, he called me again on Monday after he saw me on our brother Cecilia the God's show, and we were talking about especially these CIA comments that he made. And he told me to clarify, and he clarified to me he was not saying that foundational Black American, the term or delineation, was CIA behavior. He was saying within the foundational Black American lineage, you had people and individuals who had in the past participated with the CIA or in collaboration with the FBI. That's what he was saying. But as the video goes on, it sounded to us like you were saying delineation was CIA behavior. That was FBI behavior. And so in the future, Professor, our esteemed elder, we ask that you really be clear on that distinction. Really be clear on that distinction, because it was sounding like anybody who delineates, anybody who says anything about our heritage, our uniqueness in this country is going along with the CIA or is being paid by the CIA to push these types of agendas. All right. So I just want to add that context, family. Y'all take that as y'all will. Some of y'all probably say, hey, man, I ain't trying to hear that. I respect both sides. I'm just adding the context to it because I felt a certain type of way when I said it as well, when I saw it for the first time as well. But let's continue. And as you're going to see, it sounded like he was saying delineation was CIA.
You see how Fred Hampton was killed. You see how Malcolm X was killed. They were both surrounded by agents and collaborators that look just like us. So you can bet some of the foundational Black American people are agents, and even some from the African sides are agents. You know, I've seen my brothers and sisters from the continent be recruited by the State Department, and I tried to pull the coattail of their parents. But if your son is being brought to America, given a free education, who's going to listen to me?
Yeah.
Even if I tell you that the State Department is using him, I know the particular program, it came from under USAID, and they're going to come back to your country one day, and you're going to look up and he's going to be your governor or your president. And you won't know why he's behaving the way he's behaving. But he's got a nice house in Maryland, okay, or Virginia. Huh? I know the story, brother. I've been here a long time. So these are all of the things that's causing that antagonism. Why now? Why now? Just when we are mostly coming together and people are migrating, people are moving.
And that's again, Professor Smalls. I struggle to understand, well, what do you mean mostly coming together? When have we ever been together? You see what I'm saying? And again, that's some of that blame FBA for division. Now, again, they have whole wars. Nobody's over here. No foundational Black American is over here shedding the blood of Africans or Caribbeans. Nobody over here is dying because they're Jamaican. Okay, you have people dying in Africa over tribalism. That's a fact. You have wars and lives being shed. You have choppers being put in the hands of 10-year-olds over resources and over tribalism. That is a fact. And they have a long history of that. So again, this kind of illusion or this narrative like, hey, man, when we're coming together now, you have FBA. These people want to delineate. Are they agents? A lot of people feel a certain type of way, including myself, about that type of language, because it's like, okay, are you trying to put division? Are you trying to put what's going on in South Sudan and Congo, over in the Caribbean, the infighting that's going on in Haiti right now on foundational Black Americans? Hell, many of people don't even know that term, foundational Black Americans, in these places. So we have to be clear. We have to be clear, and we don't want to be the face of where people dump their trash. Okay, anything that's bad, we'll blame the FBAs. Can't do that.
There was a study that came out last week over 60,000 Americans, whites and blacks, are applying for jobs in Africa. They're having a friggin' titty over here. 60,000. If it's 60,000 that they've been able to analyze, let's say it's about 80,000 people from here trying to get the hell up out of here and go work and live in Africa. And this is frightening for this government. So we don't know how much of that foundational Black American thing and the ADA thing. You understand what I'm telling you? I'm telling you straight up. We don't know how much of that is USAID type of stuff. Because USAID was no USAID. That was CIA. Just State Department. That's what USAID was.
Oh, and Prof, by the way, you're right. I just see them online. I see their reasoning and their arguments online. I just can't believe the ignorance.
Well, I see their arguments and the things they are saying online. And these same tethers will sit up here and say they don't see Okada, they don't see Yankee, they don't see Jair, they don't see Black Americans have no culture, they don't see Black Americans are lazy. Okay, they don't see the undermining that goes on, but they make sure to catch a foundational Black American on Twitter calling them tether. All of a sudden, damn, they just see that everywhere. Like I say, this is the move, family. This is the move. They get the elders on here and they kind of gas them up to a certain degree and get them to say different things in order to push their own agendas. And what's interesting is, shout out to Brother Haru, who is the son of another one of our esteemed elders, Baba Kaba Kamene actually went on this dude's show and broke down to him what foundational Black Americans mean. So he's not unaware of the term. He's not uneducated on the term. He's just looking for a certain response to use against foundational Black Americans. But that's to be expected.
And how do these poor students get all of that good, expensive graphic? Where did they get it from? Who's doing the graphics for these things we're seeing? The graphics alone are thousands and thousands of dollars. You ain't gonna do this with just AI.
Hold on, let me play that back, family, because that's very important. And this is why I say I felt like he was talking about anybody who's delineating, including myself. He's saying, where did I get those graphics? These graphics are thousands of dollars. Okay, let's listen to what he's saying.
That's what USAID was.
Oh, and Prof, by the way, you're right. I just see them online. I see their reasoning and their arguments online. I just can't believe the ignorance
and how do these poor students get all of that good, expensive graphic? Where did they get it from? Who's doing the graphics for these things we're seeing? The graphics alone are thousands and thousands of dollars. You ain't gonna do this with just AI. Okay? Somebody is behind this. So if you're gonna look at
okay, so he's saying the graphics of whoever's doing these graphics, I guess he's shout out to Professor Small. I guess he's talking about the thumbnails. I don't know, graphics. I guess if somebody puts up a post of him on Instagram, Professor Smalls, I mean, you could talk to me, Professor Smalls. Shoot, I can do a graphic for you for $5. That's not expensive. He said thousands of dollars. Maybe back in the day it was thousands of dollars. Today you can get hell, they got Nano Banana, Gemini, Chat GPT. You can do a graphic. You can do 1,000 graphics in a day for $20 subscription a month. That's not difficult. That's not hard to do. But I wanted to play some of that language because he's saying that basically somebody, and he's hinting at somebody has to be funding these people to put in all of this money. Somebody has to be funding these people. And notice a level of frustration, Professor Smalls, is nobody's ever funding Pan-Africanism. No one's ever funding Pan-Africanism and some of the things we see on the continent and some of the folks who have went over there, foundational Black Americans who have gone over there and taken their wealth and their fortune and lost it all. No one's ever funding the Umar Johnsons of the world who's been raising money for schools in the name of Pan-Africanism for a decade, and that school still ain't open. There is never any conversation about the State Department, about the CIA, about the FBI when it comes to Pan-Africanism. But now, brothers and sisters, foundational Black Americans who want to define themselves, which is a power move, who are doing some of the same things that you talked about in the past, coming up with a name and identity for this particular unique lineage that we have to have some type of State Department involvement. That's interesting, Professor. That's interesting.
That thing is not a rift between some Black Americans and some Africans. That's the U.S. State Department. It may have started out with a few.
Okay, listen.
Ignorant people, but they knew how to take advantage of that ignorance. But I don't even think it started out with a few ignorant people. I think they started it. They tested the water with that first group, that lawyer woman from California and the man, and then somehow they got to Tariq Nasheed. And remember, Tariq Nasheed was going in just the opposite direction a few years ago. Why did that U-turn occur? Now, like I said,
I was surprised because I watched all the Hidden Colors. That's where I discovered you, from the Hidden Colors, and I'm like, how did you move from the Hidden Colors to this? Like, it doesn't, yeah.
Well, he may not be an agent, and he just may be disgusted and tired of thinking that he's being taken advantage of by his brothers and sisters from the continent because of his own ignorance. Just like the brothers and sisters from the continent think they're being taken advantage of when they come over here by some of us. And that's from a lack of relationship. And I'm telling you that the State Department and the American Immigration Department is right at the center of that. Ask any brother and sister that you know who's immigrated here through the legal system, what were their instructions from the U.S. State Department vis-a-vis their relationship with us?
And that's interesting what he said at the close of that video, because again, everybody makes foundational Black Americans the face of the CIA and the FBI. We're the ones collaborating against the diaspora. But Professor James Small said, if you want proof of that, ask the Black immigrants who immigrate here. So obviously they're the ones working hands-on with the U.S. State Department and the FBI, according to Professor Smalls. Okay, they're the ones who are getting these messages from the FBI. It's not us. It's not us, family. So that's the end. I'm not going to show any more videos. I have more videos that I can show, but I'll just leave it at there. And let me say this in closing. Now that we've come to a closing, family, I kind of want to just end it with this, and a message to Professor Smalls. And this is coming from Brother Chase personally, because I'm not a leader of anything. I can't speak for all foundational Black Americans. I'll just speak for myself. I love you, Professor Smalls. I respect you, what you've done for our people, and the knowledge, of wisdom, and information you've given me over the years. And the only thing that we ask is that the same love, passion, and respect you have for Pan-Africanism, the ideology that is Pan-Africanism in the global diaspora, you have that same love and respect for foundational Black Americans. And what I mean by this, I remember being on the phone call with you one time a couple years ago, and I said one of the problems I had with Pan-Africanism, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but I remember you immediately shot it down. You immediately said, that's not Pan-Africanism. What you're saying right now, that's not Pan-Africanism, and you have to stop saying that's Pan-Africanism. You're misrepresenting it. And I respected it. We want you to keep the same energy when it comes to these tethers who bring you on their show and they're misrepresenting what foundational Black American is. When people are driving narratives, when people are trying to push foundational Black Americans like it's an organization, like it's a group. Foundational Black Americans is a lineage. We don't have any leaders. We don't have a membership. We don't have chapters that you go and sign up for. We want you to push genuine talking points about foundational Black Americans when the opportunity comes up. Let's speak truth to power about our lineage and what we're dealing with. And co-sign some of the things that you've said in the past yourself. You know how Black immigrants behave when they get over here because you've said it before. We want the same unapologetic behavior you have with us to have that towards the diaspora, the so-called diaspora. Let's not sugarcoat and water down things when we're speaking to Africans, no matter how Africans feel, because no one is ever concerned with how foundational Black Americans feel. The constant attacks, the constant, we can't even have an identity, as you spoken to before. We can't talk about our heritage in the Americas before Columbus, before slavery. We have to relegate everything we do to that 4 to 6% of Africans who came from West Africa during the transatlantic slave trade. And we have to live vicariously in that. We have to be quote unquote generic Africans, while everybody else gets to have their own ethnogenesis. That generic African who went to Jamaica can now call himself a Jamaican, and there is no pushback. That African who went to Haiti, who participated in the Haitian Revolution, creating one of the first Black independent republics we see today, can now call themselves a Haitian. Those Africans who stayed behind on the continent of Africa and were colonized in particular places and helped to form the cultures and the countries we see today can have an ethnogenesis. They can say, I'm Nigerian now. I'm not just a generic African. We want the same energy. So those foundational Black Americans who you're a part of, you come from a lineage of a brilliant people, of a people who were master inventors and innovators, who fought in every war, who built this country brick by brick, who scooped up the dust and cleared the brush and built everything that people love about this country, who paved the way for Black immigrants to come here and thrive here. Those very same people who did those things should be able to identify and celebrate their own unique heritage and define themselves how they want to define themselves. Because as you told me once on a phone call, and as you said in our happy talks, if you go back and watch the full thing, that the great Dr. Wade Nobles once said, power is the ability to define yourselves. And that's what we're doing, Professor James Smalls. We're defining ourselves as foundational Black Americans. And we have to stand on that. We will stand on that. I hope that when you watch this video, you remain open-minded, that you take it in good light and understand there's no malice behind this, and that we continue to push forward as foundational Black Americans, and you understand the beauty of what we're doing, because we are truly student of yours, and we're just taking your thoughts, your ideologies, and taking it to the next level as foundational Black Americans. And for the family, it's your brother Chase. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon below, man. Go get my 20th book, When Black Americans Stop Singing and Start Swinging, highlighting the beautiful history and the true history of foundational Black Americans, what we were forged in, what we were cultivated in, okay, and what we become. Make sure you go get that on Amazon tonight. And until next time, family, you know what it is. Peace and Black power. Foundational Black Americans, you're phenomenal people.